Hello, I am Stephanie Mandeville, Communications Director for NEA Rhode Island. Today is Wednesday, October 7th, and this is the 23rd episode of Ask Larry and Bob. And I am joined, as I am each week, by NEARI President Larry Purtill and Executive Director Bob Walsh. Hi, guys.
Hi, Stephanie. Bob.
So let's, before we dig in, I just want to do a few announcements. First and foremost, welcome to our new NEARI members who I know you guys were on the Zoom orientation for those folks. We had a nice full Zoom and I popped in to say hello as well. And I want to say welcome to those folks, and for any new members who were unable to jump on that Zoom, there's another orientation scheduled for October 15th. And as far as the calendar goes, October 19th is the NEARI Executive Committee Delegate Assembly. On October 21st, we are hosting a Strike for the Common Good webinar. And on October 22nd, the NEARI Women's Caucus will be meeting. So all of that information can be found on our calendar on our website, neari.org/calendar. And I want to also draw folks' attention because we are nearing the election day, which is right around the corner. So if folks want to go to neari.org/2020, there's some volunteer opportunities. There's our Ask Larry and Bob election special from last week, and a full listing of the NEARI PACE endorsed candidates, federal and statewide. So let's dig in a little bit. Obviously, we record on Wednesdays now so that we can listen to the governor's press conference. And she did talk a lot about schools today, mostly I think because of the issue that happened in North Providence, not in any district. However, there was a significant gap in protocols from the Department of Health through to the administration. And so a student did attend school that was exposed, should not have, and that widened the net, I guess, so to speak, of how many people needed to be quarantined. This is an issue. This is an issue because testing is also an issue. So Larry, we talked, I think, last week about the issue of testing and how it's really not rapid at all. And we've heard more reporting since last week about how this is significant. Do you want to touch upon this just a little bit further today?
Sure. I mean, the whole rationale, obviously, behind rapid testing was for teachers and staff and students to be able to, if they thought they had COVID or they were showing signs of it, they could go and immediately get tested. And by the end of the day, they would know whether they were positive or negative. But it seems that sometimes getting that appointment takes a couple of days. And a great example is one we both know of today, where someone's daughter came down with COVID, is they themselves want to go get the rapid testing. We're told they need to wait 48 hours to see if it develops in them, so the test is accurate. And because they don't test on weekends and holidays, they couldn't get the appointment until Tuesday. So now the person's going to be out the next 2 days anyway. And if they have to quarantine, and we can talk about that, that whole process a little later, they could be out almost the entire month of October. So even if they could get the test, it would be Tuesday. And if it came back, we're hearing 24, 48 hours or longer to get the results. We're talking about a week. That's not rapid. And if that person's home quarantine and other people that might have been exposed to them are now home quarantine, then you're lacking staff. And that, we heard the governor today, she's talking about lack of staff and, encouraging retirees, which that's not going to work to come back and fill in for those positions. So it's a real issue. So staffing, testing right now are major problems.
Bob, while the governor was doing her presser, I went on to the Back to School RI website to look at the playbook, which is updated frequently. And this was October 1st. It was updated October 1st. And before we started recording, we went over the new protocols for quarantining. This presents a significant problem where educators who may be in a home with someone who's tested positive, they're going to have to quarantine possibly up to 24 days. How is this sustainable?
Oh, it's not sustainable. That combined with only getting the rosy scenarios of data reports all lead one to believe that this is going to be a increasing problem. The governor was polite towards teachers and suggesting that everyone should thank a teacher or support professional in the schools. A better way to thank them is to, by executive order, say that anyone who's forced to quarantine under the recently, like today, revised regulations that could have someone quarantining for a combined 24 days should not be required to discharge any of their sick time, because this is a situation that is mandated by the state, not something within their control. And that's for folks who aren't sick. That's why it's a particular problem. And we are increasingly concerned that the gaps in the system and the data reporting are covering up more sins than are being reported. So it's all that said, and let me rant on the other side for a second. If you're one of these anonymous Twitter accounts without a name attached, knock it off. We don't know who you are. You could be one of the parochial schools just trying to drum up business for yourself, because I see those ads all the time. If you're a member with legitimate concerns, or even concerns that might not prove to be legitimate, work through your system, talk to your building rep, talk to your local president, talk to us. If you're an anonymous Twitter account, I've told Stephanie to block them. She doesn't want to block them. I block them now because it's not worth our time. We've got too much important work to do to waste our time with nonsense. We're trying to make sure everybody is as safe and healthy and productive as possible. So for those anonymous trolls on the internet, knock it off.
I do want to just highlight and reiterate what you said. For folks, we're doing everything we can to help our members and to help students. So if you see something, or if you know that something is off, talk to your building rep, talk to your local president, talk to us so that we can work on your behalf. We talked about subs, I think. Larry, did you touch on subs with high-risk retirees going into back into the system? And I don't know.
I don't even know where to begin with that. And being married to a retiree who has actually gone back a couple times to help out in her district she retired from in Exeter West Greenwich.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah, pre-COVID, I should say. We kind of just like looked at each other when the governor said that, because number one, you're not going to put 60 and 70-year-olds back into a classroom and expose them. And secondly, if they're going to do virtual, then they're not trained for it. Our members went through a lot of professional development last spring, even for those who are really accomplished in virtual teaching and all the new technology. The other thing would be that a lot of retirees just wouldn't have the technology at home to do it. So yeah, maybe it sounds like a good idea, but in practicality, it's not going to work. And you're going to pay people $80, $100 a day to be exposed to COVID. I'm not sure, as your first question to Bob about sustainability, this is not sustainable for much longer. The governor was right when she said people are working their butts off, and they are, but how much longer can that be sustainable? So I just don't, I think at some point we're going to have to start thinking about going virtual, and sooner than later. And also, you know, we can take care of special needs students. We can take care of students with mental health. We have to do that. But I just don't see this as being sustainable for much longer.
We're not even into winter. We're not into flu season.
Yeah. And I don't want to be pessimistic about it or say, no, I mean, we all agree kids should be in school, but we also have to deal with reality.
Well, if you go back to maybe July, when we were talking about this, saying if it's time to be creative, let's focus on distance learning first and get creative for those smaller populations of the students that need mental health supports or need special education needs. If that's where our focus was, we'd be in a much different boat. But
there we go. slow and we went full speed ahead. And, you know, it's great. It's, you know, I want to finish that marathon too, but I've only been running 2 miles a day, so I'm probably not going to get there. So let's, you know, take it a little bit at a time.
Yes, hoping for the best, but I can see it coming down the line. We had 3 questions that were submitted. I'm going to ask them out of order than we talked about, though, because the one in the middle kind of goes along with what we were talking about, where we have an educator who is worried and concerned because she or he, I don't know who it is being pulled from hall duty to substitute in 2 different classrooms. Those 2 different classrooms are not in this educator's stable caseload. Is this allowed, and should they continue to go along with it?
File a grievance, talk to your building rep, talk to your local president, file a grievance. No, it shouldn't be allowed, but yeah, I said this last week, and this is a good opportunity to reiterate it today. We're happy to take the questions because they allow us to answer them for a broader audience. But if you see something, say something. If you see something wrong, talk to your building rep or talk to your local president and file a grievance. That would be a violation of the rules I set down. It's a violation of health and safety protocols, and it is a problem waiting to happen.
Yes, thank you. This one is, I want to say it was a South Kingstown teacher. I wish I wrote it down. I didn't. This educator was a woman, said she's excited to finally see a statewide school calendar, as was I, as were we all. However, I was surprised to see so many districts not observing Yom Kippur. Is it because it was a religious holiday, or will districts be able to use their discretion to remove or change breaks and holidays? It seems to defeat the whole purpose. Now, I did notice this. Prior to Yom Kippur, I'm in a couple of Facebook groups where folks were saying, hey, we don't have this day off, or we don't. And I thought, this is odd. We're supposed to be on a statewide calendar. And when I put out NEARI's calendar, I did stipulate in parentheses, this is based off the unified calendar, because I don't want to throw certain members who are in different districts off. Is this a thing?
It's a problem. Clearly, it's not a statewide calendar if they're not all observing the same days. For, you know, part of our long-term advocacy for a statewide calendar suggested that the religious holidays should be days where students are not required to attend school. And then if you had optional professional development days and picked enough of those days scattered throughout a calendar, you could say you've got to attend 3 out of 6 professional development opportunities on those scheduled student days off. And you could pick up all the religious holidays and pick up the day before Thanksgiving and maybe an extra day before the winter break and allow the time for everyone to observe their own personal religious holidays and still have time for professional development. So no, I do not think that should have happened. And I think it's unfortunate that it did.
So let's go to the last question, which is about evals. So this person, or member, I should say, because they did sign their name to this, was looking for an update on evaluations and wondering if there will be modifications. Do you have an update, Larry?
We are certainly pushing for modifications, and as I reported last week, I'm hoping shortly to be able to say something concrete. What we are pushing for, and we're working with the AFT on this. We're also working with some superintendents on this, because quite frankly, superintendents and principals are just as overworked and burdened as our members are, and they understand that now is not the time to be doing these evaluations. So one of the things we are trying to push is to push it off for a year. If you are non-tenured, you may still have to do some type of evaluation because it counts toward tenure, and we obviously want you to get there. But know that we are working on it. It consumes most of my days right now, working with superintendents, principals, and with the Federation of Teachers. So hopefully, I say this the last 2 weeks, but hopefully soon. And, you know, it would be a nice thing to, as I said earlier, this is not sustainable for too much longer, how hard people are working. If you throw in evaluations and everything else, and using up your sick days to be quarantined for 24 days, none of this makes sense. So we need to educationally and doing what's right, push it off.
Those are the questions that we have that have been submitted. Bob, I noticed that I think it's Eli Sherman from Channel 12 does like a comparative charting. Can you just really briefly, if you can, talk about those different numbers? There's the percent positives, but they're vastly different than what's reported out.
This is one of my great personal math nerd frustrations with the data that the governor shares versus the rest of the story data. And what Eli Sherman has done, who's one of the investigative reporters from Channel 12, following in the Ted Nisi charts can be meaningful to explain data to the public footsteps. He has added the data that other states use, which is why we can't visit a lot of other states. Very specifically, the governor talks about the overall testing rate percentage. Like today, I think it was 1.4 or 1.5%. So that would mean if 1,000 people were tested, 15 of them tested positive. But what they don't tell you is in that hypothetical 1,000 people being tested, some of them are tested every week or multiple times a week because they are in jobs or professions or circumstances where they are not symptomatic, they just regularly get tested. So you get a lower overall score. So what Channel 12 has done is they've matched the data to how other states look at it, and they also find out that, say, in my hypothetical example of 15 positive tests out of 1,000 cases, they recognize that 100 of those cases were people who were symptomatic and had never been tested before. So theoretically, they were entering the system because they were concerned they had coronavirus. And say of that overall 15 number, 10 of them were related to first-time tests. Then 10 out of 100 would be a 10% rate, which is an alarming statistic. And the way the real data has been coming in with these first-time test results, it's 5, 6, 7, 8% range, which is of concern. It is not fully accurate to only talk about the first number because they're not acknowledging a lot of those folks are tested multiple times by circumstance without underlying symptoms. And that is, in my opinion, misleading not to talk about both statistics. So I commended Channel 12 publicly for putting that data out there so we could see it. And I would encourage folks to track both. It doesn't mean it is time to panic about any particular statistic. But if you look at the first time testing percentage data, we are now in the range that we were in while we were one phase ago. We're in phase 3 of this process. That data, if you use that as a standalone analysis, would have us back to phase 2. So if you start seeing other indicators, hospitalization rates going up, people on ventilators going up, also manifest themselves, we're going to have to go back a phase. And I wish they were more forthright in discussing all of this because that's the only way the public's going to trust those weekly press conferences if they answer all the questions.
She does make reference to those numbers. She just doesn't give those numbers. And since we're throwing kudos at Channel 12, I want to throw them at Channel 10 because Brian Crandall is the one who asks a lot of those probing questions, and he will repeat them week to week if necessary. So
yeah, and I think it's a good shout out, Steph, to say by and large, most of the reporters at the press conference are asking really good questions, and the weekly interviews. Kim Clunian's now interviewing the governor weekly. And Ashley Cullinane interviews the governor weekly. That's really important. It's important to have that weekly accountability. I wish it was more press conference and less dialogue. I wish it was more Q&A.
Yeah, me too.
No more questions about Halloween, but the rest of it are really important.
We should keep in mind that with those numbers, it's why Rhode Islanders can't go anywhere. we basically can't leave the state because no other state wants us because our numbers are so high. So we can downplay that all we want, but the truth is, you know, you gotta go, if you're gonna go to New Hampshire, you have to go in the middle of the night to get through Massachusetts. So it's, I mean,
Where's your next bike race? That's my question.
I can't bike race anywhere because no state will let me. But seriously, we can't go anywhere. So obviously other states recognize those numbers and they're not good.
Yeah.
Yep. Here we are. We're in October and it's getting sobering again.
Well,
Because we're needing to keep an eye on a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And again, you know, we're working as many channels as we have available to us to help either get the word out or to raise awareness of specific issues happening across our NEARI districts. But we need our local presidents, we need our members to keep in contact with us, with their UNICERVs, with their presidents, et cetera, so that we can work specifically on your behalf.
And I just want to follow up with something Bob said about sick days too. The governor next week, if she really wants to thank teachers and staff for working their butt off, not only not use sick days if you're being quarantined or have COVID, but also push off those valuations for a year. There are two things. You want to thank teachers, you want to thank staff. There are two things right there you can do it that are really meaningful. Thank you is nice, but it's not going to take the stress and burden off of anyone.
And by the way, that's while we represent our 12,000 members, that's good public policy for the entire state. If you want
Yes.
people to be honest about their symptoms and their situation, make sure there's no penalty for quarantining. Make sure it's an easy thing to do because that's the only way we're going to keep these numbers down overall. These cases get transmitted by people who have it, and a lot of them already know they're not feeling well, and they're still interacting with the rest of the world, probably out of economic necessity. Some because they're just, well, let's just say presidential, and they're ignoring science, but most, it's probably based on economic necessity, and we can solve that second problem.
And we're going to solve the first one on November 3rd.
Yeah, we're going to solve the first one in 4 weeks. You should be getting your absentee ballot shortly. If you applied for an absentee, there is still time to apply for an absentee ballot if you have not done so already. When you get it, turn it around as quickly as you can. If you want to know who we're recommending, last week's episode with all our list of endorsed candidates are up on the website. Let's get this election successfully concluded and get this country back on the right track.
Make your plan, talk it out, talk it through. Think about which day, if you're going to get your ballot, are you going to walk it in? Are you going to mail it in? Decide what you're going to do. If you're going to vote on election day, decide what time you're going to go, put it in your calendar, and make sure you don't get too busy and miss it, watch it pass you by, because we can't afford that. That's it, gentlemen, really. So once again, thank you for taking the time to do this and talk to our members and our non-members who I know watch this week to week. So we'll be back next
Spending
week.
23 episodes with all of us.
Yes. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Steph.
Thank you, Stephanie.